On to question number 4. Did you know any victims or someone who had relations to a victim?
I didn't know anybody directly, and I don't think I've ever met anybody that had anyone they knew or a relative or anything die. But the thing about it is that as a country, when you go through something like that, you almost feel like you know those people, like, because you're living it. I mean, I didn't, obviously, not to take away from any family members that actually did have somebody in that, because that would just be devastating. But as a country, you learn about all the people that died. You learn about all the stories. You see all the, what they did before and where they were when it happened. I mean, for the last however many years, 20-something years now, I've learned all about people that were in it. So no, not directly, but I feel like it.
So a big topic when you think about 9/11 is the Islamic religion, Middle Eastern cultures. Talk about your view of the Islamic religion before 9/11 and then post 9/11.
I never thought about I'm not a religious person anyway, so I wouldn't have really thought too much about the Islamic religion.
Let's say if you were in contact with an Islamic person,
I wouldn't have thought anything about it. And after it happened, as much as I hate to say it, for a while you kind of profile. You're traveling. I mean, even a couple of years after this, you're keeping your eyes open.
Even now,
yeah, to a certain degree. But it changed. Well, and then the other thing is that once all that happened, you learn all about it. I mean, it depends on the source that you're watching, but you learn. You can't help but learn more about the religion after something like that happens, and then you have to make up your own mind. And me personally, I have not, to me, nobody's more right than anybody else. So, there's always bad apples and everything, and I think that, that whole thing is really what that was. And so I don't think much about the religion itself even today, other than you just notice people. If that's good or bad, I don't know.
All right, question number 6. Are there any noticeable differences from pre 9/11 and post 9/11 in everyday life?
Definitely. And I know that my kids don't really understand it because they grew up with this, but it changed your thought process forever. It's almost like this pandemic. Like, you guys will never forget this. And this will change the way you do things. With 9/11, the biggest thing that I remember it changing is that, our country just became very aware. Before 9/11, people were having car bombs and hijackings and plane things in their own countries, and, that stuff just never happened here. But after 9/11, now, everybody is vigilant about this kind of stuff, and it's never not in your mind, at least for somebody that lived through it. For kids, it's like me with Pearl Harbor. I mean, I didn't know anything about Pearl Harbor other than what I've seen in the textbook. But when you live through something like this, you never forget it. It changes the way you do things and the way you notice things and your view of the world, and you just can't help it. And that's what happened with my generation.
And I think as Americans at this time, we were sort of lulled into a sense of invincibility.
We were just safe. We were the safest country in the world. Nobody would ever mess with us. And somebody did, and they did it in a big way.
Yeah. And then final question. Having lived through 9/11 personally, what rank would you give this event in American history?
That's a really good question, because you can only categorize it within your own span of time. So for me, it's the number one historical event. But like I said before, Pearl Harbor, it was basically, in a lot of ways the same thing. And, so I don't know where I would rank it as far as all the individual American events in history, but for me, it's number one. I'll
Yeah.
never forget it.
It's definitely
And
a
this-
perspective
This
thing.
thing we're going through right now would have to be number two. So
Yeah, definitely a perspective thing.
absolutely.
Well, thanks for having you on the show, Dad.
Absolutely. I enjoyed
Great
it.
interview.
Yes.
Speaking later.
All right.
All right, Mr. Gardner. I'm here with my father, and we're going to be talking about 9/11. And this guy lived through it. So,
Florida.
question number 1. Where were you and what were you doing?
I was at home, if I remember correctly, and I was probably I was a graphic designer and I was working from home when that happened. And I had the TV on and I could see the TV from my office, and I don't remember what it was, what I was watching at the time. It was probably some kind of just mindless, daytime TV. And then they broke in and they went live, and that was after the first plane hit. And then, at first I was like, that's not really happening. Like, what is this? Like a movie or something? And then all of a sudden, I turned the volume up, and everybody was sort of, the newscasters were all kind of freaking out. And then that's when the second plane hit. So to answer the question, I was at home. We lived in Birmingham at the time, and I was working from home, and I had the TV on. And of course, when it all started happening, they just interrupted everything that was on TV, and it went straight to that. And then we just watched it like all day.
So, 9/11 is a very unique part in American history, being that it took place on American soil. It's one of those things that pretty much everyone who lived through it has their own account, and you pretty much remember everything about that personally. So, question number 2, more of a statement. Give your account of 9/11 and your understanding of how the events went down.
Well, my generation never lived through anything like that, so it was a big deal, and you didn't really know what kind of big deal it was initially. It was more just like shocking, but the account of it was pretty much, from my perspective, was exactly what I just said. Like, I didn't know anything about Al Qaeda or Osama bin Laden really before that. I mean, it's funny that we're doing this interview today because I just watched the whole thing about George W. Bush last night, and of course, most of his presidency, or half of it at least, was all about 9/11. So I relived it last night at midnight on PBS, but basically it changed, the biggest part about it was it just changed the way everybody thought. Like, the account of it was watching the TV live, and you see that kind of stuff all the time now, live, but it was live, and watching the planes hit the buildings, and then they had the whole Pentagon part, and then all these other stories started coming up about what had happened, like the guys overtaking the terrorist on the other plane and landed in the ground. I think that one was going towards the White House. So, it was just super freaky, and it was shocking because normal people like me didn't really know anything about all the logistics of it. Now, I understand now that the president had been warned about it, but they didn't take it seriously. And so, after you live through something like that, you will kind of want to know all the details, and it's very interesting. And so I've learned a lot of details and stuff about it since. But that's my account, personally. And of course, the other part of that is that it freaked me out, and it freaked everybody out forever. It changed my whole life, like just how you think about the world.
So, 9/11 happens. The day is notorious in American history.
Infamous.
Talk about the next day. After 9/11, what's running through your mind?
You know, it was kind of like somebody died in your family.